contribute to make not only the United Nations a better place, but the whole world a better place. And and when I hear people in the United States in Congress saying, we don't want the United Nations, what's this United Nations for? And I look back and said, one thing that God didn't give those who are born in America is memory. Because people in the U.S., it is true, this is an instant life, right? We like instant milk, instant coffee, because we don't want memory. You don't want to brew coffee because tomorrow morning you might still find some of the coffee beans left in your pot. No, you want instant that you drink, the cup is clean, and no memory. This country doesn't have memory. But I'm one of those who believe that in the future, a new generation will rise in this country that will look back and remember the good things that this country has done. And I promise you that among them will be the contribution that this country made to find a body like the United Nations. Because of the United Nations, some people are eating today when they wouldn't eat. Some people are getting medicine today because they wouldn't eat. But you don't hear about the United Nations. You hear about the United Nations that carries guns and wars and beats up on people. But I want to assure you, there is another United Nations that cares for the poor, for the defenseless. We from South Africa, having had that experience, that is the United Nations we claim as our own home. But I don't want to talk too long because you'll never invite me again. So let me just end here by saying it is a tremendous joy and an honor that you invited me, and thank you for celebrating South Africa's independence with you. Thank you very much.
It's very, very clear why President Mandela insisted that this man represent his country at the United Nations and would not take no for an answer. Thank you for a very human and very personal and very inspirational talk.
Thank you.
And the ambassador will take your questions now.
Now just remember, the only question that is a dumb question is the one you don't ask. But if you ask it, it's a brilliant question. Remember that. Yes.
All the way from Rhode Island. Hello.
I want to know, because I do teach the human side of the United Nations to my students in Rhode Island, and here they are. And we talk about, as you said, with the ambassador at the time, how he wouldn't accept you to sit in the floor with him. I wonder, when you have a racism that's so deeply seated for so many generations, and then suddenly everyone woke up one day and apartheid is over, this is great, how do you undo all those generations worth of the white people, spitting on the people in the street? We watch The Power of One in class with the little boy PK who didn't believe in apartheid. And how do you undo this? I mean, I know Nelson Mandela is the perfect man for that job, but again, how do you do this in day-to-day life?
Well, you do it one day at a time, one life at a time, by trying to reflect to those who didn't like us that, in fact, what they did was so stupid because it didn't make sense. But you don't say it in their face. You just continue living with them because they suddenly realize. I mean, I can't tell you that even in the office, it's sometimes we do simple things, and my secretary would say, my grandmother would never allow me to do this, but now I understand why she was wrong. But you do it by simply living the better life that you can. That's the best way you can do. Because, trying to legislate sometimes doesn't work, because then people feel they are being forced, and but if you just let people live. And one of the amazing things which the children who were 2 years, 3 years, they're children in South Africa, black and white, who've only known Mandela as president. They've never known what's apartheid. I mean, my own grandkids, they say to me, you didn't go into one door, and they told you couldn't go. Why did you do that? Why didn't you go through? And we find ourselves having to retell the story. But there's one African tradition that helps us. African tradition is you tell stories, and this is the responsibility. So you tell children stories, and you don't leave them to to MTV to tell them the story, or you know, those, you tell stories and say, these are the things that have, because you learn so much and say, oh, really? But it's the best way to do that. And, you know, and you know, it's amazing. You know, there are parts in South Africa where you hear stories, farmers, rural areas of farmers. And, you know, and one of the things, let me just give you maybe one example. This is, at one time I was working as a marketing executive for an oil company. And this was an African, I would travel with this African colleague I worked with. When we got to the farms, you know, these farming estates, he would get on the front gate. Of course, black people don't use the front gate. You have to go through the back gate. And, you know, I wouldn't put up a fight about why can't I use the front gate? No, I'll go through the other gate. But inside, when you sit, they suddenly realize among themselves, there's no sense to this. But, I mean, that's the thing. And that's why you need, the other thing that helps you is reading. Reading helps. Because you read stories and you read about what has happened. And South Africa has been endowed with a culture of people who've read books and wrote books. And reading helps, because reading just gives you another perspective that you'd never found anywhere. That's the only way I know. Otherwise, you know, people say legislate, make this a rule, make. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. No, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes.
You made a comment about America with the illegal aliens and the border, and then reviewing the papers we were given here, it's talking South Africa has placed military along the border to stem the thousands of Zimbabweans. How does South Africa handle this? Do they patriate them? What do they do with the people that are crossing the border?
We now, you know, as you know, Zimbabwe is a country that is undergoing great difficulty, and the government is not doing very well. There's political strife. We actually, as South Africa, don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of Zimbabweans are already in South Africa. And what we've been trying to do is that to help them come through, because remember, the border between Zimbabwe and South Africa is especially when it rains, is very treacherous. So you have more people dying on the rivers, the Limpopo rivers, trying to go across. So it's been an attempt to try and make the migration more humane as possible, and, you know, to assist them, because we understand what's happening in Zimbabwe. We've tried to help in Zimbabwe, but it's been very difficult because the government is very stubborn. President Mugabe is an older man, and, you know, he's right, and and, you know, so we are left with all these people, and, you know, so we're trying to make it as humane as possible, because it is a very big problem for us. It's a very problem. Yeah. No, thanks. Yes.
Since you're at the United Nations, could you just pick 3 world, or less if you don't have the time, pick some world problems that are on the stage today that seem intractable, and using from your experiential base how you would like to see them solved, or at least addressed, if not solved?
Well, I guess that the most difficult question we face in the United Nations, of course, is the Middle East, the issue of Palestine and Israel. It's a very difficult battle, and we have argued as South Africa that the answer lies in the Palestinians and the Israelis talking, and not through the bombings and the suicide bombs and what have you. But they will have to find a way to make peace. That is the most difficult, and we've been engaged with both the Israeli side and you know, the Palestinian side, to say to them, you know, you have to find a way to talk this through, and we speak with credibility, because the third largest community of Jewish people outside of New York, and, you know, Israel, New York, and South Africa. But in South Africa, we never knew actually that people were Jews or anything. I mean, South Africans, and, you know, we never to get like. So there's a lot of ties between